Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're going to start a process that might take about a week, and I'm going to make some bread using these grapes that I've just picked off of our grapevines outside and what's inside this box. And I know from brewing beer and making wine that a great place to find wild yeast is on the outsides of grapes, the grapes themselves and the grape vines. So it's the end of September here and there really isn't much left out on the vines. We've picked most of the ones that we wanted to eat and the animals have got the rest. But there is a lot of yeast hiding on the outsides of these grapes and on the vine itself. So just like we did when we made the ginger bug, we're going to try and coax the yeast and all of the other microbes that are living on the outsides of these vines and grapes back to life. This is similar to, but different from making a sourdough starter. It's pretty much exactly the same in that in sourdough, you're looking to get a whole bunch of different microbes and yeast together that will both add flavor and leavening to the bread or make it rise. And the making it rise is the yeast and the flavor is all of the other microbes. So this is an art, not a science. I'm not sure what's here. I'm not sure if this will even taste good. And if it does taste good, then we're going to try to keep it going as long as we can so we can keep using it for multiple bakes of bread. So that was about 600 mils of water. And now that I've got that in there, I'm going to add just a spoonful of sugar. And I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to leave it on the counter with a lid on, but the lid is just going to be on here really loosely so that any gases can escape. So I'll give it a swirl, mix it all up, and hopefully over the next 3 or 4 days, we'll start to see activity inside, we'll start to see bubbles forming, and we'll know that the yeast is taking hold. And then we'll bake some bread. Okay, so here we are. A few days have gone by and I've got a pretty nice growth of yeast in here with the grapevine. And it smells really good too. There's a lot going on in there. So for anyone who has ever made our ginger bug, there are a lot of pitfalls. And the biggest pitfall is you don't know what's going to happen. This is a wild organism that we've gathered from outside. We have no idea what's going on in here. We know that it's mostly yeast, but we also know that there's some other bacteria happening. And the idea is that the yeast and maybe some lactobacillus get going quickly. They drop the pH so none of the bad microbes can live inside here. Now over here, just for fun, I took some regular old raisins from the cupboard and I put them in a jar with some water exactly the same, treated them the same, and we've got some good yeast growth there as well. So just for fun, I'm gonna make 2 loaves of bread, one with each wild yeast, see how the difference in flavor is, see how they rise differently, see what happens. This is all an experiment. So what we're going to do is make 2 loaves of bread using what's called a poolish. And so a poolish is just a pre-ferment. We've taken some of the flour that we're going to use for the bread and the water, some of the water that we're going to use for the bread. We're going to mix it up ahead of time and we're going to leave it overnight. That gives the yeast a chance to really get going. It starts to build flavor and gluten structure all at once. So I've got 250 grams of flour and 250 grams or 250 milliliters of water. And I'm going to do the same in both. And I'm going to leave this for somewhere between 12 and 18 hours. And I can't give you an exact time frame because this is wild yeast and I've never collected this wild yeast before. I have no idea how it's going to react. It could be super aggressive and be ready almost immediately, or it could be really lazy yeast and take longer to get going. We're going to figure that out. So we just mix it together and get something that's kind of a wet slurry. Okay, so I'm going to put a lid on both of these and then I'll leave them on the counter at room temperature overnight. I'll watch them closely in the morning to see when it's time to move on. Now these, I will add a little bit more water to them and a little bit of sugar and I will just treat them as I would any sourdough starter, but I won't know if I'm going to keep them until we taste the bread tomorrow because they might be horrible. Overnight, these seem to have bubbled up really nicely. So let's open them up and take a look. This is a point where when you're using wild yeast, you need to start to make some more decisions about how you're going to proceed. And the first one is, did it bubble up at all? And this one did bubble up quite nicely, and so did the one with the raisins. Not as much activity from the wild yeast harvested from around the raisins as I get from the one that I did with the grapevines. Next decision you need to make is, does it smell good? Should you even proceed? Should you even go forward? Because if it smells horrible, it's going to taste horrible probably, and there's no need to move forward with your bread. So both of these smell pretty nice, fairly neutral, fairly neutral. Next decision is there enough activity in here? Do you think that there's enough yeast activity to carry through an entire loaf of bread? And I think in both cases, there's enough. Maybe not quite enough with the raisins, but I'm willing to bet that there is. If there isn't, there's no shame in adding a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of commercial yeast into this mixture just to give it a little bit of lift. Now we're going to move on with the rest of the ingredients. So there's more water. I'm going to add some salt and the rest of the flour. Same goes into that one. And I'm just going to mix this with my hand. Your hand is the best method, and you just want to sort of grab it and squeeze it through your fingers until it's all completely mixed. And once I get both of these mixed together, I'm going to leave them on the countertop here. And over the next hour, I'm going to fold them 2 or 3 times. And if you want a more detailed explanation of the folding, you can check out another one of our videos, and I'll link to it below, where I go into it in a little more detail. Folding is as simple as it sounds. I've got a wet hand, and we just go underneath and fold it over top. Give it a little bit of a turn, and just go around, folding it, just like that. And so I'll do this once around, put the lid back on, and I'll come back in about 10 minutes, and I'll do it again. And I'll do that 3 times in the first hour, and then I will let it rise until it's doubled in bulk. Now, while I let this dough rise, we'll open this box. So this is a Challenger bread pan. I emailed Challenger and said, you know what, I really like this. I've been following you on Instagram. I really like this pan. I like the look of the pan. I like what it does. I'd love to get my hands on one so that I could try it out. So they sent me one. They sent this to me for free. They're not paying me to talk about it, and they don't have any sort of editorial control over what I say. They sent it to me and said, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. And they trust that I'm going to love it. So this is a modern cast iron take on French cloche, which is similarly shaped thing made out of clay that's unglazed. And so you would soak the top part of the clay in water, put your bread in, put it in the oven, and then that would steam, and it would sort of recreate a professional bread baking oven, or even a wood-fired oven for that matter, where you kind of get that steam buildup. This is cast iron. So it's like having a Dutch oven, except it's got really cool handles. And the bottom is thin, so you can get the bread in there without threat of burning your hands, or without the same threat of burning your hands. And I kind of like the idea of using it because it's oblong, and I won't be restricted to round loaves of bread like I am with my Dutch oven. Huh. The owner sent me a nice little note too, handwritten. That's kind of nice. Thanks, Jim. So I'm going to get this ready to go into the oven, and I'm going to bake our 2 loaves of bread today, one right after the other, using this. Give it a run through and check it out, but I got to tell you, on first blush, I'm really liking this. It seems extremely well made. The handles are in a great place to get it off when it's in the oven. Okay, so enough waxing poetic. Let's get back to business. Hey, Jules.
Hey, Glen.
So
hey, friends.
We're not tasting the bread just yet.
Oh. Well, maybe not that one. This one's okay.
Not a monumental fail, but I did get new bannetons, and you coat the inside with flour to keep the dough from sticking. But because they're new, they weren't fully coated. They stuck badly.
Oh, that would explain the shape.
The shape, and then trying out a new piece of cookware.
Oh, you tried out 2 new things at once.
2 new things at once. No problem. So
2 new things at once. Always a mistake.
the next time you see us, these loaves will be much better. Because sometimes you fail. You just have to get back on the horse and try again. So 10 more seconds, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, take 2. A little bit of flour on the board. And we'll scrape this dough out, and we'll try and shape it. And so I've made sure that I've got enough flour in the bannetons this time, I think. So hopefully they won't stick. Now, shaping is a bit of a problem because I'm not used to shaping this shape of loaf. So we'll see how I make out. It is a very sticky dough. Fold over, and then back, and then back, and then back, and pinching down, and then into the banneton, seam side up. And I better mark it. This is the one made from the grape yeast. And we'll cover those over for the final rise. Now, the Challenger bread baker has been preheating in the oven, and it is hot. So we'll pull that out, take the lid off, and our loaf of bread has proved, and I've done the finger poke test. Now let's see if I can get it in here better than I did last time. Did it stick? Oh, it came off. So I've got a lom, and I'm going to score the top of the bread with the lom so that we can get some nice ears. Lid back on the bread baker and into the oven for 30 minutes. Now it's time to take off the lid. Oh, look at that loaf of bread. Looks amazing. And back into the oven for the final bake. I think we are done. So I'm just going to check the temperature. And we are just over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So this loaf is good to go. Set it aside to cool. Put the lid back on the baker and stick it back in the oven to heat up before I do the next loaf. Okay, the bread baker is reheated. Time for loaf number 2. Let's see how we do this time. Boom. Oh, looking pretty good. So, I've got the lom, and we'll score it. And I'll score it on both sides. I kind of liked the look of that. Lid back on and back into the oven. Time to take off the lid. Looking good. Back in. There we go. Another amazing looking loaf of bread. So I'll let that one cool down too. Hey, Jules.
Ooh, that looks pretty good, Glen.
It does look pretty good.
Hey, friends.
So, wait a sec. So this one is the raisin, or the bread made with the yeast from the wild raisin,
Okay.
or the wild yeast from the raisins.
Okay.
And this one is from the grapevines. Okay.
It looks great.
It does look great.
Okay, so I'm going to keep...
Which one do you want to go first?
Well, I'm going to put one on both hands.
Okay.
I'm going to take a look at them. They look very similar. Both got big, airy bits. So that's my raisin.
So once I figured out my problems, well, problems relating to these 2 loaves of bread, I think I've nailed it this time. It's got good weight.
Is it time?
Okay, let's try it. Okay.
So it's got a nice crispy crust to it.
Yeah.
It's chewy in the way that it's supposed to be
The way
chewy.
it's supposed to be chewy. It's got good flavor. Mm-hmm. I like the flavor. And the flavor comes from the yeast, not from the grapes or the grapevine. It's that wild yeast that's giving the flavor. And that's going to be the same with the raisin. We're not going to get any sweetness from the raisin. We're not going to get any raisin flavor. What we're going to get is wild yeast. So to me, slightly different flavor between the 2.
I'm not as convinced about the flavor difference. But If there is, it's subtle. But this is really nice bread. Very nice bread, and an alternate way to get hold of some yeast.
Things I've learned from this journey. You can harvest yeast from almost anywhere. There are 4 or 5 fruits that you don't want to use, and I will list them below because they have a certain enzyme that goes against the formation of gluten. And they will release that enzyme, and it will destroy your loaf of bread, so you don't want to use them. I will list them below. But you can pretty much go to any fruit in your backyard or dried fruit that you might have in your cupboard. Do that same thing and harvest the yeast. It's always going to be different. What works for you one time may not work for you the next time because you are dealing with wild living cultures. This Challenger bread baker, I'm absolutely in love with it. I am absolutely in love with it. I think that is a worthy addition to our kitchen. And when you buy bannetons, don't be surprised if the first time you use them, the dough sticks
a little bit
completely. Make sure you really flour them well before you use them. So give wild yeast a try. Go out there and see what you can come up with. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.